Hey guys, Noah Frank here with the Driver's Market. Today we're going to be showing you the installation video for our flagship product, the ImportLock. This is for model IL-01. That is for any Toyota with the ADD system from 1986 until the year 2000. Behind me is my 1992 Toyota 4Runner. This is what we will be installing it on today. This has the 22RE 4-cylinder, although again it would work for any 86 to 2000 vehicle. So if you had the 3VZ or if you had anything with the 5VZ, it would work on any of those as well. What you're going to see in front of you is what you're going to get in the kit. This is the TerraFlex kit. You will be receiving this exact kit from us, and you will use certain parts out of this kit in order to install, and we'll show you what those parts are. You will receive a housing and a shift rod from us, a baggie of hardware, and a baggie with the gaskets. You will need a couple of other specialty tools here. You'll want some Permatex, you'll want some high temp gasket maker, you'll want some blue Loctite, you will want a T40 Torx bit head, you will want a 3mm Allen key, and you'll want some gear oil. This is for if you leak any when we are doing the actual removal of the previous housing. You'll also want a pair of needle nose pliers and a standard wrench kit for this operation. This vehicle right now is on ramps. If you are doing this in your driveway or you have the vehicle on ramps, expect minimal spillage. If you are doing this on a level ground or if you are downhill, expect lots of spillage. So we'll show you exactly what our process is, and we'll show you all the parts included. Okay, we're going to begin by taking a look at what you're going to need from your TerraFlex kit. Again, this will just be included in your box from us, so I'll go ahead and open it up for you and show you. You're going to start by grabbing your hand throttle. This is what's going to be actually doing the shifting. We're going to mount this on the four-wheel drive shifter. You're going to need the wire. This is the wire cover. TerraFlex will send you some zip ties. You may want some more, but it will really depend on how you have this situated in your engine bay and underneath the vehicle. And you will want your hardware kit. We will show you during the installation of the actual TerraFlex which parts that you will need from this hardware kit. This is the package that you will get from us that has the gaskets in it. You should have 3 different gaskets. The first one is going to be in a bag. This is your oil seal. The second one is going to be an O-ring, and the last one is going to be your oil wiper. The second baggie that you will receive from us is your hardware baggie. There are several things in this baggie. Everything here is stainless steel, so starting with your spring. This is your shoulder bolt, your safety rod. You have your bolts, washers, and lock nuts. This is your clevis and your E-clip. This is what will secure the factory shift fork onto our new machined rod. The shift rod will come lightly lubricated, and it is a solid piece of stainless steel. The housing is a single milled piece of 6061 aluminum. Taking a closer look at the housing, there are a couple of things that I'd like to point out. This groove in the front is where your O-ring will go. This housing slides into the factory housing, and that O-ring provides a good seal. Inside of the housing, there are 2 grooves cut. The first groove is the deeper groove, and that is for the oil seal. The second groove on the outside is for the oil wiper. The wiper will keep debris from getting into where the oil seal is, and it will protect the longevity of the seal. The seal is completely shrouded by the whole housing, and so there's no way for debris that gets past the seal to get into your differential. This should be a completely sealed unit once the installation is complete. Okay guys, so step 1 is to remove this factory skid plate. Okay guys, we're joined under the vehicle now, and we have the catch can down below in case any oil drips out. But the order of operations of removing this factory housing are as follows. We've got 2 air lines here. These go into the air box. And then we have this plug here. This is your 4-wheel drive light. The 2 soft air lines, they go into hard lines here. We're going to unbolt those because we're not keeping any of those. And then we're going to undo the 4 factory bolts and pry off the factory gasket maker in order to remove this housing. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I've already taken this plug off for your four-wheel drive light, so that's removed. We're just going to kind of peel it over here out of the way, and then we'll remove these two soft lines, these two air hoses, and then I will get in here right now and begin to remove the bolt that goes onto the hard lines. You may have some dirt and some grime on there that you have to break off, but it should fall into the catch pan if it's down below. Okay. Once you break tension on these, they should come out very smoothly. All of these bolts that we're taking out today are machine bolts. Okay, the first one is out. Come over here to the second one. The second one can be removed at any time. I'm going to remove it right now just for clearance. And then we'll just go ahead and move these hard lines out of the way to begin. Now you can see we've got the two bolts at the top and the two bolts at the bottom on this housing. I'm going to go ahead and remove those now. These are all 12 millimeter, by the way. You will be reusing these bolts, so put them in a good location where you will not lose them and that they won't get damaged. We've got one. You can see a little bit of gasket maker on there. When we do take off the factory housing, we'll have to remove that gasket maker. Again, none of these should be binding or grinding. They should all be very easy to remove with just your fingers once you break tension. None of these bolts should be cross-threaded. And if they are, feel free to take the time to clean up the threads on the inside of the differential. These lower ones are a little bit more tricky to get out just because you have to work around the central support. But again, they are coming out very smoothly, no grinding or binding. Okay, we have all four of them out now. Now what we will do is very gently start prying this housing forward. The housing should be on dowels, and those dowels may hold it in place. For this application, I'm going to run and grab a pry bar really quick, and I will join you guys back under here. Okay, so all that I did is very lightly with the pry bar pry on the back of this housing. You can see that we're losing some fluid right now, and luckily all of it for us is going directly into the catch pan. Once the housing has been popped loose, what you need to do is work it ever so slightly off the dowels and break that gasket maker up. What you're then going to want to do is move from the driver's side to the passenger side. That is from the left side of the vehicle to the right side of the vehicle with the housing, because the shift fork has to clear the opening there. And now you have removed your factory housing. We'll meet you guys back on the workbench for disassembly. Taking a look now at the factory housing, this portion is the air box. We will not be reusing this moving forward. This is your factory shift fork. We will be using this moving forward. This portion of the housing is the factory shift box. We will be using this moving forward. If I rotate this a tiny bit, this is your factory four-wheel drive plug. We will be reusing this. This opening right here is where we are going to drive the dowel pin out that holds the shift rod onto the shift fork. We will be driving that out, and then you can put this plug back in and seal it. We will not be reusing anything other than this plug as a sealing cap. Okay guys, taking a look at the factory housing again, there's an order of operations to removing this stuff. We're going to begin by removing the four-wheel drive light. Now, I've already broken tension on this switch. This is a 27 millimeter. You do not have to replace yours. I'm going to replace mine with a newer one just because this one has been under a vehicle for 32 years and it's pretty grimy and gunky. There's two pieces here. There's the O-ring and the switch itself. So I'm going to go ahead and set those off to the side. If you take a look in there right now, you can actually see the back of the shift rod. And what that is when this shift fork moves forward and back, that rod actuates the four-wheel drive light. What we're going to do now is grab the Torx bit from earlier, and we're going to remove this plug just in the front of the housing. So I will go ahead and add that to my wrench. And then again, these are all machined, so they should come off nice and easy. We're going to be reusing this plug, so don't throw that out. And then what you're going to want to do is move the shift rod closer to the four-wheel drive light further from the airbox. That is not in this position, that is in this position. Once you are in that position, looking into the hole, you should be able to see a dowel pin. What we're going to do is very carefully punch that dowel pin off. That dowel pin is what holds the shift fork onto the shift rod from the factory. We are not going to be reusing the pin once it is out. So I'm going to line this up the best that I can. Anything is a hammer. And then we're just going to check progress really quick. That pin is nearly out. A couple more taps and we should be all the way through. And the pin has come out. This is the pin. We will not be keeping this pin. Now the shift rod should be free moving and we can unbolt the air box. These are 12 millimeters and there is one on each side. So we should be able to get these off. Again, I've broken tension on all of these to make it easier for the recording of this video. They don't take much, and again, they're all machined. They should come out nice and easy once tension is broken. And we will not be reusing these bolts for this particular project. Now what you have is the air box that can be removed from the housing. We are not keeping this air box or this shift rod. We will be keeping your factory shift fork and this housing. So we're going to go clean these up off camera and we will be back in just a minute. Okay, so we're going to begin installing the gaskets into the TDM housing. There's a couple of things that you're going to want here. You're going to want pliers that have taped up ends so that you don't gall the housing. You're going to want some WD-40. We're just going to very lightly spray these parts just so that they don't get stuck or bind. And then we're actually going to be using the shift rod to install the gasket inside. This is going to aid quite a bit because that gasket is directional. So you do have to put it in correctly. If you do not put it in correctly, you will probably have to get it machined out. So this is a very critical part of the install and this is the most important part. So I'll go ahead and show you a couple tricks that I learned when I was doing this the first time. To start, we'll take a look at the housing from the front. This portion we're going to be calling the rear. And so from the front, what we are going to do is take the flat part of the shift rod and we are going to insert it so that we have a flat space here in the front of the housing. This is going to be kind of hard to show you, but this gasket here, because it's directional, the shape of it is actually different. The portion that is not controlling the oil is flat and the portion that is controlling the oil has a double lip. So what we're going to want to do is have the double lip portion facing the front. This again is the most critical part of this install. So you want the double lip portion facing the front. That means the flat portion faces the rear. Inside of this housing there are two cuts. There's a forward cut and a rear cut. The forward cut is for the gasket, the rear cut is for the wiper. So we have the shift rod inserted so that we have a little bit of space here in the front. What we're going to do is just very, very lightly grease this part and take a little bit of that and put it on this inside lip. What you're going to want to do is clamp it so that it goes flat and then force the U into the front of this. Okay, this is the orientation that the gasket will be in as you slide it in. Now I do have the shift rod in there, so the gasket is resting on a flat spot so it doesn't bend. The double lip portion is facing front. So what we're gonna do is just lightly press this back, keeping it flat all the way. There you can see it popped into the slide inside, into the cut. The shift rod is just lightly holding the gasket in place. And then I'm going to push up on it. And the gasket is now perfectly sealed in the lip on the inside. As you can see, the gasket is now sitting perfectly into the first groove on the front side. So that gasket is your oil seal. That being in place now means that you should be able to see it from the back side through the second shelf. The second shelf is where the oil wiper will sit, and we'll get that installed next. We're going to get the wiper in place now. This one requires a lot of pressure because we've machined this to be a very, very tight seal. So the wiper is shaped in such a way that there's a conical end that comes out of one side and the back side is completely flat. The way that this sits into the housing is so that the conical end protrudes out the back of the housing. So what you're going to do is get this situated just very tightly into the corner like that. And then you're going to grab your pliers and just work these edges in until it actually snaps down in place. Now, this is a very difficult process just because of how tight this is. That's why we got these pliers wrapped up, just so we don't gall either the sides of the housing or the actual gasket itself. But what's going to happen is you're just going to work those corners in very slightly and then pop it into place. And now we've got the wiper in place. Again, the conical end should be facing the rear of the housing. So now we have our oil seal in place. We have our wiper in place. The only other thing to do is to take your O-ring and pop it into the O-ring groove on the front of the housing. And your housing is now ready to install the shift rod. Okay, so we're going to get ready to join the two housings. First, we're going to go ahead and put our plug back in. Again, we are not reusing that dowel, so we can just go ahead and get this nice and snugged up. You can add a little bit of gasket maker to this. There was no gasket maker on this from the factory, so I will not be adding any to it. But if you want to, we totally understand, and now is the time. That is nice and snugged up. So we've got the O-ring around the housing, and we are going to fit that into the groove here on the factory housing. This is going to be a very tight fit, but of course we don't want to leak any oil out. So there, we've gone ahead and joined those. The hardware that we provide, you have a nylon lock nut as well as 2 washers, and these are 13mm bolts. So go ahead and add a bolt and washer to each side. There is no specific torque spec on these, but go ahead and make sure that they're nice and snug so that this can't rattle apart. Okay, so all that we've done now is join the two housings with the hardware that's provided. These are 13mm bolt and nylon lock nuts. You want to go bolt, washer, washer, nut. The O-ring has nicely compressed inside of there, and this is a very, very tight solution, so this should not allow for any leaking. We are going to get situated now and install the shift rod. We will not be using the Loctite yet, but we will be using it in the future. Taking a look at the shift rod now, you can see that there are through threads with a flat end on one side. So what we are going to do is we are going to take the shoulder bolt that's been provided, slide it through the clevis on the top part of the clevis. On the bottom there is an opening which we will not need, and then we are going to situate the shoulder bolt onto the flat portion of the shift rod. So this is when you'll want that 3mm Allen wrench. You do not need to get this super tight because we will need to adjust this later on in the video. But for the time being, go ahead and get this situated for installation. This is what that system should look like. And now we are going to get it mounted inside the housing. Okay, this is going to be the basic layout of how the shift rod, spring, the shift fork, the E-clip, and the housing go together. So the spring goes into the pocket in the end of the shift rod. What you'll want to do is position the shift fork into the housing so that you can insert the shift rod right through it. The shift fork goes with the flat side towards the four-wheel drive light and the protruded conical side towards our housing. So go ahead and just lightly set it in here. The clevis on the shift rod will sit on the shelf of the housing. So the way that this is going to work, I'll show it to you before having the shift rod in, before having the shift fork in, is the rod will go in place with the spring. And this will take a little bit of finessing to get it to go through the gaskets, but there's one, and then the second gasket, it will need to pop into place. And now the shift rod is inside the housing in a way that will allow it to move. So we are going to pull this back out. So we'll position the shift fork inside the housing. We will have the rod go through the shift fork this time. Position the clevis so that it goes into the opening at the top, and then pop it through the inner gasket. Once all of that is in place, you will be able to see the groove for the E-clip. The E-clip can be pressed into place with a flathead screwdriver, your thumbs if you are very strong, or I like to use those pliers that we used earlier and just lightly press down on that E-clip until it snaps. Now your housing has been fully installed. When there's oil in here, it will be encapsulated around the end of the shift rod, and it will completely cover the shift fork all the way up to the oil housing, which is sealed completely inside the unit. Taking a look at the top of this unit, you can see the spring down in there. That spring does not interfere with the ball detent at the end of the four-wheel drive light. When the shift rod is pressed in, you can see that the rod does detent. Grabbing your four-wheel drive light, make sure you install your O-ring back. And that should be a nice slip fit. So my favorite thing to do to break these actuators in is to spray a little WD-40 in there. I spray it around the spring by taking the four-wheel drive light out and spraying a little bit into the tube, and then I spray it just down into this housing. What will happen is, while it's early on, there's a lot of tension holding the spring in place because those gaskets were just seated. So they do take just a little bit to break in, but as you can see, when you work the product more and more, it becomes much easier to use that. This will naturally break in over time and become much easier to use, but in the beginning, I just actuated a couple times, maybe 15 or 20 before install, and that keeps this all lubricated and it keeps the gaskets nice and firm in place. So again, once you're using this, this will become much smoother, but in the beginning, it might make a couple of clickies, but it is working and that spring is bringing it back to home. Okay, this is the inside of your differential. We cleaned up the edges of the mating surface a little bit with a razor, but I wanted to show you this groove right here is actually your four-wheel drive shift fork slot. So this collar slides back and forth. Right now it's in the two-wheel drive position. If it was all the way over here, it would be in the four-wheel drive position. So when you reinsert the housing, the shift fork has to go around that collar and into the two-wheel drive position. We'll go ahead and demonstrate that for you in a second. I'm going to put some of the Permatax high temp gasket maker on the surface, and then we're going to go ahead and install the housing. So I'll catch up with you guys in just a sec. Okay, so inside the cab what we did is we removed the outer bezel with the leather shift boots, and we removed the lower bezel with the rubber shift boots. And from the top on the four-wheel drive shifter down, we just fed the wire through. The best way to do that is to get a rag with a little bit of WD-40 on it and just wipe it up and down the wire housing, and then just go ahead and slide that all the way down through and then run it along the side of your transmission and I will meet you guys down below. So we're under the vehicle now. This is the wire coming through the opening at the top of the shifter, is where we just saw inside the cab. And what we're gonna do is run it way away from the front drive shaft. I'm gonna run it up here. I know you won't be able to see it, but there's a wire loom that comes up here on the top of the transmission that goes all the way back for the reverse lights. So I'm gonna zip tie it up here out of the way. I'm gonna run it up over the sway bar in the front here, and then we're gonna run it over the top of the differential. Okay, so this was the end of the hard lines that we took off earlier. These are just air lines. I really like where that hole is right there to be able to remount the bracket for the four-wheel drive indicator light. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a Dremel and I'm just gonna cut the ends of these hard lines since we're not using these anymore, and then I'm just gonna cap them off, and then I'm going to run my wire right underneath the four-wheel drive light. Okay, so now we've gone ahead and capped those lines off and then just added the bolt back in. Don't forget to plug your four-wheel drive light back in. And then I've ran the wire over the diff and under those hard lines. And what I'm gonna do is zip tie this up here in place so that this sleeve can't move forward or back. And then we will position the wire in here around the shoulder bolt. We're back in the cab now, and we're going to put the bezels back on and the shifters back on. We're going to mount the thumb throttle, so that way we know exactly how much excess line we have, because we're going to want to pull it all the way forward and snug it up as much as we can, making sure again that we avoid the front drive shaft and the CV axles. Anything that could be spinning, we want to make sure that we stay out of those moving parts way. Okay, so from that original baggie of stuff that you get from TerraFlex, you're going to want just one of the longer Phillips head bolts. It should be able to thread into the end of the shift mechanism. And then you're also going to want the large rubber grommet. It'll have a little wider spot on one end and a very narrow spot on the other. What we're about to do is going to be a very, very tight fit of this grommet over the top of this shifter. There's no great way to do this. The way that I like to do it is to spray a little bit of WD-40 into it so that there is lubricant on the actual grommet, and then we're going to take the end of the grommet and get it started on the threads just like that. This is a 13mm deep socket. This should fit over the threads, and I should be able to tap the grommet down onto the actual shift handle. And this could take a while. It all depends on how your setup is, but what you're going to do is just tap this all the way down and then clamp this all the way around it. You're going to tighten it down with that screw that you just grabbed, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. Okay, so this is what your shifter should look like when it's fully installed. Again, it could be on either side. Realistically, it could be on either shifter, but I know a lot of guys run a true throttle cable off of this shifter. So we've opted to have ours on the four-wheel drive shifter. And then what it will do is when you're ready to shift into four-wheel drive, you will actuate this backwards. So we're gonna go up into the front and finish mounting the cable and give it a couple test shifts. Okay, back underneath the vehicle in the front, you'll see that we have a hose clamp up here and a wire stop over here. These will be in your kit, although they may not look like these two that we're using. We're cycling through these, but these will work for the demonstration video. The way this is going to work is you're going to create a loop with your wire that comes out the back of the clevis. So here's the loop. And what it does is it captures the shoulder bolt through the clevis. So it will look just like this with the wire going around the shoulder bolt in the clevis when it's back in the slide zone. So what we're going to do now is add a drop of blue Loctite to the shoulder bolt, get it in place, and then I'll show you how to tension this. So you can see the way that the cable stop also has the loop going through it. So this is the line that comes from your shifter, and the excess we have wrapped up because we're going to tension this now. Now inside the cab, this is in the forward or two-wheel drive position. So you can see when I apply too much tension, it wants to actually actuate the shifter. So what we're going to do is tighten up as much as we can before the shifter starts to actuate, and then we're going to tighten down our clamp. So I'm going to get it just as tight as I can while it's still as far back as it can go. And then I'm going to put tension on this clamp. There. Now there's very, very little slack in this line, and if it were to be actuated, it would shift forward. Now, a pro tip is to grab onto your clamp with a pair of channel locks and give it an extra tightening just to make sure that this does not slip. Okay, so as you can see right now, I'm in the vehicle and we are in the two-wheel drive position. When I go to actuate into four-wheel drive, you can see that the rod shifts forward and fully engages. Now we are in the four-wheel drive position. And that's all there is to it. Once you install your skid plate, you're ready to go. Do some testing to make sure that the wire has stretched. It's normal for the wire to stretch a couple of millimeters, so it may take some adjustment, but this was the installation of the ImportLock model IL-01. I've been Noah from TDM. Thank you for watching.